At exactly 9:15 on the morning of June 4, 1942, a sense of dread hung heavy in the air aboard the battleship Yamato. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood waiting for news that would either confirm his deepest fears or validate a decade of ignored warnings. 6 months earlier, his aircraft had shattered the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. 6 months of uninterrupted Japanese victories had followed, unfolding precisely as he had predicted. Now, the Imperial Japanese Navy was converging on Midway Atoll, poised to deliver what Yamamoto's peers believed would be the final, crushing blow that would force the United States to the negotiating table. Everything Japan had staked its future on was about to be decided in a matter of hours. Yamamoto commanded an overwhelming force. 4 heavy aircraft carriers, Kaji, Kaga, Tsuraya, and Hiryu, were bearing down on the tiny island. These were the same carriers that had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor, the sharpest blade in Japan's naval arsenal. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines stretched across the Pacific in a vast web of steel and firepower. The pilots aboard those carriers were the most experienced naval aviators in the world, men who had trained for years and honed their skills in combat over China and across the Pacific. On paper, Japan possessed every advantage. Yet Yamamoto carried a burden none of his fellow admirals shared. He had lived in the United States. He had walked its streets, studied in its universities, and played poker with its naval officers. He understood America not as an abstract enemy, but as a living, breathing society. And what he had learned terrified him. Yamamoto knew that the Americans were not weak, not soft, and not the decadent materialist Japanese propaganda portrayed. He had seen something far more dangerous, an industrial giant with immense resources and a stubborn determination that had just been awakened by bombs and torpedoes. As Yamamoto waited aboard Yamato, he understood that within 6 hours, everything he feared might come true. What unfolded at Midway, and what followed during 3 years of brutal warfare across the Pacific, would become one of the greatest failures of strategic perception in military history. Japanese leaders had convinced themselves that they understood America. They were catastrophically wrong. That misunderstanding did not begin at Pearl Harbor or Midway. Its roots stretched back decades, long before the first bomb fell. The fundamental problem Japan faced in 1941 was not primarily military. It was perceptual. Japanese political and military leaders had constructed an image of America that bore little resemblance to reality, and that false image would drive decisions that guaranteed disaster. Within Japan's leadership, a powerful belief had taken hold. Americans were spiritually weak. This was not merely propaganda meant for public consumption. Senior generals and admirals genuinely believed it. They were convinced that a society built on democracy, individual rights, and material comfort could never match the fighting spirit of warriors raised in the Bushido tradition. Japanese officers openly mocked American soldiers as products of a soft culture, young men raised in automobiles and movie theaters, incapable of enduring the hardships of true combat. In their view, concern for individual survival was a fatal flaw. A soldier who valued his own life could never fight with the absolute commitment that victory demanded. This contempt shaped Japanese strategic thinking. Military planners assumed that Americans, when confronted with a sudden and devastating defeat, would lose their will to fight. They believed that a nation of factory workers and shopkeepers, focused on personal comfort and economic success, would seek peace rather than endure prolonged sacrifice. The phrase repeated in Tokyo's war councils was that Americans lacked the stomach for a long war. One powerful strike, they believed, would be enough to break American resolve. Japanese intelligence reports seem to confirm these assumptions. Officers stationed in Washington and other cities described labor strikes, political divisions, and isolationist sentiment. They observed a relatively small peacetime military and concluded that America was unprepared for modern war. While acknowledging America's industrial capacity, they believed it would take years to mobilize fully. Years, Japan assumed, that could be used to secure an impenetrable defensive perimeter across the Pacific. What most Japanese leaders failed to grasp was how deeply wrong these conclusions were, and how costly that misunderstanding would soon become. Many Japanese leaders also viewed America as morally corrupt and socially chaotic. Reports spoke of gangsters roaming cities like Chicago and New York, of crime, excess, and disorder. American films shown in Japanese theaters reinforced these images, portraying society obsessed with money, pleasure, and individual desire. Intellectuals dismiss American culture as shallow, lacking the spiritual depth and historical refinement of Japanese civilization. To many in Tokyo, America appeared wealthy but hollow, powerful on the surface yet fragile underneath. These assumptions hardened into certainty, and certainty replaced careful analysis. There was, however, one senior officer who knew these conclusions were dangerously flawed. His name was Isoroku Yamamoto, and he had spent 4 formative years inside the country his colleagues believed they understood. Yamamoto was born on April 4, 1884, in the small city of Nagaka in Niigata Prefecture. His father was 56 years old at the time of his birth, and in keeping with Japanese tradition, the boy was named Isoroku, meaning 56. He came from a samurai family that had fallen on hard times after the Meiji Restoration, having fought on the losing side of the civil wars that unified Japan. The loss of status and honor left a deep imprint on Yamamoto's upbringing. From an early age, Yamamoto showed exceptional intelligence and determination despite frequent childhood illnesses. He excelled academically, particularly in mathematics and literature, and developed a stubborn will that would define his career. He passed a rigorous entrance examination for the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy and graduated near the top of his class in 1904, just in time for war with Russia. In May of 1905, Ensign Yamamoto found himself aboard the cruiser Nishin during the Battle of Tsushima Strait, a decisive Japanese victory and the first time an Asian power had defeated a European nation in a modern naval battle. For Yamamoto, the triumph came at a terrible personal cost. A Russian shell struck his ship, knocking him unconscious. When he awoke, he discovered he had lost 2 fingers on his left hand and suffered severe wounds to his thigh. The injury marked him for life. Among geisha who served him, he earned a darkly humorous nickname, the 8-cent Admiral, a reference to the reduced cost of manicure for a man with only 8 fingers. Yamamoto wore his wounds with pride. They were proof that he had paid in blood for his nation. In the years after the war, Yamamoto rose steadily through the naval ranks. His superiors recognized him as unusually intelligent, open-minded, and fluent in English. He attended the Naval Staff College, where he excelled in strategic thought. In 1916, he was adopted into the Yamamoto family, a common practice intended to preserve respected family lines. By 1919, Lieutenant Commander Yamamoto had attracted enough attention to receive an extraordinary assignment. The Imperial Japanese Navy sent him to the United States to study at Harvard University. Yamamoto arrived in America at the age of 35. He was small even by Japanese standards, standing just over 5 feet tall, with broad shoulders and an intense, penetrating gaze. At Harvard, he enrolled as a special student and focused on studying the American oil industry. This was not academic curiosity. Yamamoto understood that oil was the lifeblood of modern naval power. Control of petroleum meant control of fleets, aircraft, and the ability to wage war. Yet Yamamoto's most important education took place outside the classroom. Japanese officers abroad were expected to gather intelligence, and Yamamoto took this responsibility seriously. During his 2 years in America, he traveled extensively. He hitchhiked through New England, across the Great Plains, visited oil fields in Texas and Oklahoma, and explored industrial cities in the Midwest. He lived among Americans, stayed in their homes, ate in their restaurants, and spoke with workers about their lives and beliefs. What he witnessed challenged everything Japanese leaders believed about America, and planted doubts that would haunt him for the rest of his life. What Yamamoto saw as he moved across America left a profound impression on him. In Detroit, he walked through automobile factories and watched assembly lines operate with a speed and precision that astonished him. At the Ford Motor Company's Highland Park plant, cars rolled off a line in intervals so short they seemed almost impossible. The sheer scale of production dwarfed anything Yamamoto had encountered in Japan. He toured steel mills in Pittsburgh and Gary, where massive furnaces burned continuously, producing more metal in days than Japan could generate in months. In Texas, he visited oil refineries processing volumes of petroleum that exceeded Japan's annual consumption. To Yamamoto, these were not abstract statistics. They were unmistakable indicators of national power. Trained as a strategist, Yamamoto immediately grasped the military implications. Industrial capacity was destiny in modern warfare. The nation that could manufacture more ships, more aircraft, more weapons, and more supplies would inevitably prevail in any prolonged conflict. America's factories, shipyards, and oil fields represented a depth of power Japan could not hope to match. Even more unsettling was the speed at which American industry operated. Yamamoto understood that if the United States ever fully mobilized, it would do so fast and on a scale that would overwhelm any opponent. Equally important were Yamamoto's observations of the American people themselves. Contrary to Japanese assumptions, he found them neither lazy nor frivolous. Americans worked hard, took pride in their productivity, and possessed an intense competitive spirit. They argued constantly, criticized their leaders openly, and seemed obsessed with personal freedom. Yet beneath that surface disorder lay remarkable resilience. Yamamoto saw a population capable of uniting rapidly when challenged, driven by pride and an unwillingness to accept defeat. During his time at Harvard, Yamamoto developed an intense fascination with poker. He played obsessively, often through the night, drawn to the game's blend of probability, psychology, and nerve. Fellow students remembered him as relentless at the table, calculating odds carefully while reading opponents with unsettling accuracy. His winnings funded his travels across the country, allowing him to see even more of America. Poker taught Yamamoto how Americans approached risk. They were willing to bluff, willing to raise the stakes, and stubbornly unwilling to fold, even when the situation appeared dire. Years later, historians would note how closely Yamamoto's thinking resembled a poker player's logic. The Pearl Harbor attack, conceived under his command, was a massive gamble. He hoped a single, devastating strike might knock America out of the game, before its industrial strength could be fully brought to bear. It was not the plan of a man who underestimated his opponent. It was a desperate wager of someone who understood just how powerful that opponent could become. When Yamamoto returned to Japan in 1921, he carried knowledge that troubled him deeply. He knew Japan could not compete with America's industrial output. He understood that American society, far from being weak, combined innovation, productivity, and stubborn determination into a formidable whole. Any war between the two nations, he believed, would be a gamble Japan could not afford to lose. In 1926, Yamamoto returned to the United States, this time as a naval attaché at the Japanese embassy in Washington. For 2 more years, he immersed himself in American military and diplomatic circles. He attended social functions, interacted with U.S. naval officers, and continued his relentless poker games. In casual settings, he sometimes dismissed American officers as overly relaxed, more interested in golf and bridge than tactics. Yet the surface disdain masked a deeper respect. Yamamoto never underestimated what America could achieve when mobilized. During this second posting, Yamamoto studied how American industry had shifted during the First World War. He saw how factories rapidly converted from civilian goods to weapon production, and how shipyards launched vessels at astonishing speed. He understood that the same assembly line producing automobiles could just as easily produce aircraft, tanks, and warships. More importantly, Yamamoto grasped a psychological truth his colleagues ignored. Americans disliked starting fights, but once attacked, once their pride was wounded, they fought with a ferocity that was difficult to match. History, particularly the American Civil War, had already demonstrated this capacity for endurance and sacrifice. As the 1930s unfolded and Japan moved toward increasingly aggressive policies in Asia, Yamamoto became one of the few senior officers willing to speak openly about the dangers of war with the United States. His warnings, grounded in first-hand knowledge, would soon place him on a collision course with his own nation's leadership. Throughout the 1930s, Yamamoto increasingly found himself isolated within Japan's military leadership. He opposed the invasion of Manchuria in 1931, warning that expansion on the Asian mainland would entangle Japan in conflicts it could not easily control. He objected even more strongly to the full-scale war with China that began in 1937, believing it would drain resources while provoking international hostility. Most dangerously for his career, Yamamoto fiercely opposed the Tripartite Pact of 1940, which aligned Japan with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. He believed the alliance would drag Japan into a catastrophic confrontation with the United States. Yamamoto's outspoken opposition earned him powerful enemies. Ultra-nationalists within the military labeled him a traitor corrupted by Western influence. Death threats became a near-daily occurrence. Junior officers of the Navy Ministry even approached him during the failed coup attempt of February 1936, seeking his support. Yamamoto ordered them back to their posts without hesitation. His refusal to align with extremist factions only deepened their hostility. By 1938, the danger had grown so severe that Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yonai reassigned Yamamoto to sea duty, appointing him commander of the combined fleet. The move was both a promotion and a form of exile, intended as much to protect him from assassination as to utilize his abilities. From his new position, Yamamoto intensified his warnings. When Prime Minister Fumimaro Kono asked him directly about Japan's chances in a war against the United States, Yamamoto answered with chilling honesty. If ordered to fight, he said, he could guarantee fierce resistance for the first 6 months. Beyond that, he had no confidence in Japan's prospects if the war continued for 2 or 3 years. He urged every possible effort to avoid conflict with America. Yamamoto calculated that Japan's window for success was painfully narrow. After 6 months, American industrial production would overwhelm everything Japan could place in the field. Yamamoto repeated this assessment to other officials. In September 1941, he warned that Japan would initially enjoy success, spreading outward like an octopus extending its tentacles, but that this advantage would last no more than a year and a half. He compared Japan's situation to a man who had seized a tiger by the tail, unable to let go yet doomed to be held on. Despite these warnings, Yamamoto was overruled. His colleagues clung to their belief in spiritual superiority and decisive battle. They convinced themselves that American will could be shattered just as Russian will have been broken at Tsushima in 1905. The decision for war was made without him. In October 1941, General Hideki Tojo became Prime Minister. Tojo, a longtime advocate of expansion, committed Japan to war against the United States and Britain. Yamamoto, bound by duty, was ordered to devise a plan to neutralize American naval power in the Pacific. Though he opposed the war itself, he resolved to give Japan its best chance of survival. That meant striking first, striking hard, and gambling on shock. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto's carriers launched 353 aircraft in 2 waves, devastating the American Pacific Fleet. Battleships burned, sailors died, and the world was thrust into war. It was one of the most successful surprise attacks in military history. Yet, Yamamoto felt no triumph. While his staff celebrated, he remained withdrawn. He later wrote that a military man could scarcely take pride in striking a sleeping enemy. Victory achieved in such a manner, he believed, carried a sense of shame. Most critically, Yamamoto recognized what others did not. The American aircraft carriers had escaped destruction. The oil storage facilities and repair yards remained intact. Above all, the attack had unified the United States. In the days that followed, Yamamoto watched as America mobilized with terrifying speed. Congress declared war with near unanimity. Recruiting stations overflowed. Factories converted to wartime production far faster than Japanese planners had predicted. The nation Yamamoto had studied was now fully awake. For 6 months, just as Yamamoto had foretold, Japan surged across the Pacific. Wake Island, Guam, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, and Burma fell in rapid succession. Japanese forces seemed unstoppable and confidence soared. But Yamamoto knew the clock was running out. He needed to destroy America's aircraft carriers before industrial output tipped the balance. To do so, he devised an ambitious plan to lure the U.S. fleet into a decisive battle near Midway Atoll, a remote outpost northwest of Hawaii. The gamble would soon test everything Yamamoto had feared and predicted. The plan Yamamoto devised for Midway was bold and dangerously complex. Japanese forces were divided into multiple groups spread across vast distances of ocean, all meant to converge at precisely the right moment. Yamamoto believed complexity was unavoidable. He had to draw the American carriers into battle and destroy them before the United States could bring its industrial strength fully to bear. What he did not know was that American codebreakers had already pierced Japan's naval communications. at Station HYPO in Hawaii. A team led by Commander Joseph Rockefeller had broken enough of the Japanese naval code to identify an impending attack against a location designated as AF. To confirm their suspicion, American intelligence sent a deceptive message from Midway reporting a shortage of fresh water. Soon after, Japanese intercept confirmed that AF was indeed experiencing water shortages. The trap was set. Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned 3 American aircraft carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, just beyond the horizon. What Yamamoto intended as a tactical surprise would become an American strategic ambush. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Japanese aircraft struck Midway Island. Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo, commanding the carrier force from Akagi, believed the Americans had been caught unprepared. His planes pounded the airfield while his crews prepared a second strike. Unbeknownst to him, American carriers were already in position. The battle opened disastrously for the United States. Torpedo bombers from all 3 carriers launched attacks against the Japanese fleet and were annihilated. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet lost all 15 of its aircraft, with only 1 pilot surviving. Of the 41 torpedo planes launched that morning, only 6 returned, and none scored a hit. Their sacrifice was not in vain. The low-altitude attacks forced Japanese fighters down from their protected positions and disrupted flight deck operations at a critical moment. Minutes later, American dive bombers appeared high overhead. At 10:22 a.m., aircraft from Enterprise plunged out of the sun. Within 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were engulfed in flames. Bombs detonated among fueled and armed aircraft on the hangar decks, triggering catastrophic explosions that turned the ships into infernos. Later that afternoon, aircraft from the remaining Japanese carrier Hiryu struck Yorktown with bombs and torpedoes, temporarily disabling the American ship. But American dive bombers found Hiryu before sunset and destroyed her as well. By nightfall, Japan had lost all 4 of its carriers. These were the same ships that had attacked Pearl Harbor, the core of Japan's naval striking power. Even more devastating was the loss of experienced aviators. Pilots who had trained for years and accumulated thousands of flight hours were gone, and Japan lacked the training capacity to replace them. Yamamoto received the news aboard Yamato with outward calm. His chief of staff later wrote that Yamamoto felt bitter, close to swearing. Inwardly, he must have felt anguish. The 6 months were over. From this point forward, American industrial capacity would grind Japan down in a war of attrition it could not win. The defeat at Midway was concealed from the Japanese public. Survivors were isolated, and the government announced a great victory. Within the military, however, those who understood the truth realized that Yamamoto had been right. The months following Midway confirmed his fears. In August 1942, American forces launched their first major offensive, landing Marines on Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. Japanese troops, taught that Americans were weak, encountered fierce resistance in brutal jungle fighting. Night after night, Japanese forces launched attacks that were repelled with devastating firepower. American soldiers did not break or retreat. They kept coming. Even more revealing was the contrast in logistics. While Japanese troops starved, American forces received steady supplies of food, ammunition, medical care, and reinforcements. Japan's industrial capacity was only a fraction of America's, and the disparity showed everywhere. Japanese supply ships were sunk by aircraft from Henderson Field, forcing reliance on fast destroyer runs that delivered too little, too late. Disease and malnutrition killed soldiers faster than combat. By December 1942, Japanese losses on Guadalcanal were catastrophic. Vice Admiral Reizo Tanaka later wrote that Japan's fate was sealed during the struggle for Guadalcanal. The island Japan had dismissed as insignificant became the graveyard of imperial ambition. In February 1943, Japanese forces evacuated the remnants of their troops. It was the first retreat of the war, and it marked the beginning of an irreversible decline. As Japan's position in the war worsened, Yamamoto drove himself harder than ever. He moved constantly between advanced bases, determined to raise morale and personally supervise operations. Even as the risks increased, he refused to remain behind the lines. Yamamoto believed that leadership demanded shared danger, that a commander must face the same threats as the men he sent into battle. This belief, deeply rooted in a sense of duty, would eventually cost him his life. In early 1943, Yamamoto scheduled an inspection tour of Japanese bases throughout the Solomon Islands. Details of the journey were transmitted using a code Japanese officials trusted completely. Once again, that confidence proved misplaced as American codebreakers intercepted and deciphered the message. When Admiral Chester Nimitz received the decoded information, he was confronted with a grave moral and strategic decision. The intelligence revealed Yamamoto's precise travel schedule, flight route, timing, and aircraft. Yamamoto was no ordinary officer. He was Japan's most capable naval strategist, and a man admired even by his adversaries. Eliminating him would deal a severe blow to Japan's war effort. Yet doing so risked exposing America's ability to read Japanese codes. If Japan realized how accurately the operation had been planned, they might change their encryption methods. After weighing the consequences, Nimitz authorized a mission. The opportunity to remove such a pivotal leader was simply too significant to ignore. On April 18, 1943, American P-38 Lightning fighters took off from Guadalcanal on one of the most daring long-range interception missions of the war, skimming low over the ocean to remain undetected. They flew hundreds of miles guided by precise calculations and flawless timing. At 9:34 a.m., the American pilots spotted two Japanese bombers escorted by fighter aircraft. One of those bombers carried Admiral Yamamoto. What followed was brief but brutal. In a sudden clash, American pilots shot down both bombers. Yamamoto's aircraft plunged into the dense jungle of Bougainville Island. When Japanese troops later recovered the wreckage, they found Yamamoto still seated upright, his body secured by the harness, his hand clasping the hilt of his sword. Death had come instantly. The loss of Yamamoto struck Japan with crushing force. The government delayed the announcement for weeks, eventually presenting his death as a noble sacrifice in battle. He was posthumously promoted to Marshal Admiral and honored with a state funeral. To the Japanese public, Yamamoto had embodied naval brilliance and early wartime success. He was the architect of Japan's bold strategies and a symbol of national confidence. His death intensified the growing sense of unease that had followed the defeats at Midway and Guadalcanal. In the United States, reactions to Yamamoto's death were complicated. Many American officers held deep respect for him as an intelligent and dangerous opponent. Privately, some admitted that Yamamoto was one of the few Japanese leaders who truly understood America's industrial power and national character. His warnings about a prolonged war had been accurate had Japan listened to him. History might have unfolded differently. Instead, his advice was dismissed, and Japan bore the consequences. Following Yamamoto's death, Japan's leadership grew increasingly inflexible. With his voice gone, the Navy lost one of its strongest advocates for realism and strategic restraint. Decisions were driven more by desperation than by careful analysis. As American forces advanced across the Pacific, capturing island after island, Japanese defenses crumbled beneath relentless firepower and superior logistics. The conflict became exactly what Yamamoto had feared from the beginning, a long war of attrition that Japan had no means to win. By 1944, American shipyards were producing aircraft carriers at an astonishing rate. For every Japanese carrier destroyed, multiple American ships entered service. The skies were filled with American planes flown by pilots trained through massive programs Japan could not replicate. Submarines severed Japan's supply routes, choking off fuel and vital resources. Air raids reduced cities to ashes. And the empire Yamamoto had struggled to defend steadily collapsed. Yet, Yamamoto's legacy endured beyond the battlefield. His early understanding of American strength became a lesson studied by historians and military strategists alike. He had not been blinded by arrogance or ideology. He had observed factories, people, and systems and reached logical conclusions. In a society that prized obedience, Yamamoto had the courage to speak uncomfortable truths. That bravery defined him more than any victory. When the war ended in 1945, Yamamoto's warning seemed almost prophetic. He had promised 6 months of success and delivered exactly that. He had predicted disaster beyond it, and history confirmed his judgment. His life remains a powerful reminder that understanding an enemy is not weakness, but wisdom. The lesson remains timeless. True power is built not on pride alone, but on preparation, production, and unity. Underestimating an opponent leads to ruin. Yamamoto understood this truth, but his nation chose not to listen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share with others who value real history and the lessons it offers.